Welcome to Family Sociology. We're looking at, looking at bringing up baby. Now, quite clearly, if you aren't already aware, parents are the single most powerful influence on children. But with the growing number of mothers that are in the paid workforce and non-family individuals such as daycare workers, babysitters, they're increasingly involved in a child's socialization. So changes in the family have had a huge impact on families, and there is a marked increase in divorce, single-parented families, step families, and other versions of family. And this is all impact on children being raised as well. In addition, the influence of television, other media on children is pervasive. This chapter considers a number of aspects of socialization, ranging from the traditional family to the more current trends. Now, when we think about socialization, this is the process of passing on the culture's way of thinking and behaving. Okay? So anything that we're doing that's teaching children how to be thinking about being in our family, living in our neighborhood, and extending beyond that. And this can occur, as is suggested there, cradle to grave. So first of all is the inner circle of a family socialization, how to be a member of our family, what's the rights and the wrongs, the good, the bads, the best and the worst, what is it? And then we get outside of that into introducing ourselves to other kids the same age in school. And then we get outside of that further, we start to go past, high school, post-secondary, work. And so socialization carries on throughout life. As though it's most normally associated with childhood, it does continue right on through adult life. This learning can occur through explicit instruction, kind of like what you're doing now. You're taking explicit instruction on how to be a nurse, how to be an ECE, how to be an engineer. Whatever the course material you're taking, that's how to be the best that you can be, and be specific. It's explicit, meaning that it's formal, it's written, it's visible, it's there, and it's time sensitive, and that you're taking this over a period of time. But it can also be through assumptions that parents express through the way they treat you and the way they treat others. And you can observe through observation, which is the third way. Children watch what goes on around them and learn about how to think and how to behave, whether that be through their parents, through their peers, through the television, through media, through any number of sources. And so we're going to look at all of that. Through socialization, individuals, you and I, we learn a bit about who we are, our identity, our status, and our roles within society. How to be a son, how to be a daughter, how to be a brother. And then further on, how to be a student, how to be a peer, a friend, how to be a lover, how to be a parent. So we learn these different roles, how to be an ECE, how to be an engineer, how to be a nurse. We learn all these different roles through socialization. A child participates actively in their socialization process. They ask questions, they participate, they engage, they make mistakes, they have successes, and they also make choices about their behavior through this period of time, and they get feedback about that. And some of that feedback supports continued behavior, and some of it tries to deter it. The levels of physical maturation, intellectual development, and social experiences help determine whether a child can understand and comply to the socially approved behavior. And that is what is socialization.
Now, when we think in terms of defining children, how we socialize children reflects on what we expect of their future, and it reflects the value we place on them. Now, in Canada, in the early years, children were often employed. They had jobs. We had children in part to help complete work that needed to be done, whether that was on the farm or in the manufacturing industry. The 20th century saw the arrival of the economically worthless child. Now, this doesn't mean children were worthwhile, but they weren't a source of income, so they became known as economically worthless, but emotionally priceless. So who was expected to provide the emotional satisfaction was for the parents. Increasingly, childhood became regarded as a special time and has increasingly been differentiated from adulthood. There was a point in our history, not that long ago, some grandparents probably remember this, where children were seen as essentially little adults. So when we think about parents as the first socializers, whether it's the number of parents, one or two, or in some cases perhaps more, their marital status, sex, sexual orientation, the age of the child's parent figures help to shape the child. Children who grow up in two-parent families, one-parent families, and step-families have different socialization experiences. Children live in single-parent homes face higher risk of lower academic achievement, but also when we look at other family types, there are other advantages and disadvantages which therefore make the socialization process for these different, for children in different families be quite a bit different from one another in some cases. Now, when we look at this chart, we're seeing the distribution in percentage of the census families by presence of children. This is between the years 2001 and 2011. The proportion of children living in households with married parents decreased between 2001 and 2011. Children living with both biological parents who are married to each other do the best, with adoptees with married parents coming in a close second. Now, when we talk about doing the best, it's not necessarily doing the best at all elements. It just means that they have the best opportunity for success because they haven't had some of the other sort of crises events that might occur for some other families through divorce, through bringing in new children and having a step family, that these are crises. They aren't necessarily all bad, but they make the people in the family have to adjust and change, and not all adjustments and changes are done equally well. Children seem to have more difficulties if they grow up with never married and divorced or remarried parents. Children living with neither biological parent, except adoptees, have the most difficulty. Children with lesbian parents do at least as well as those in single-parented families. Not more likely to be, they are not more likely to be homosexual than the general population. So you can socialize someone to be homosexual, but that's not what occurs in gay and lesbian marriages, is that they don't produce gay and lesbian children. Adolescents with same-sex parents do not differ from those with different sex parents on psychological well-being, on peer relations, on school variables, substance abuse, delinquency, and victimization. So it shows that, family type can certainly affect children's socialization, but not always maybe as you may think. Parents' jobs can affect the family in several ways, whether it be the number of hours they work, the work demands on the family, or the income. Parents in jobs requiring a higher education are more likely to be employed, receive a higher pay, and live in more affluent neighborhoods. Canadian children in affluent neighborhoods tend to score higher on tests for school readiness than children living in poorer areas. Now, it's partly because of the proximity to better schools, access to resources that they can afford to pay for their children to be prepared, whether that's having resources at home, an enriched environment, and all that makes a difference. Income also determines both children's clothing, activities, and what can decide their peer group. When parents have less education, their preschool children tend to watch more TV and read less. Later school performances are related to early experiences with books. When mothers and fathers have complex occupations, children do better in school. Complex works provides a variety of tasks and involves qualities such as people skills, knowledge, and an ability to deal with changing circumstances. And all those things can contribute positively to the effective running of a family and therefore raising children. When mothers and fathers have complex occupations, children do better in school. The work this work is what teachers, doctors, business managers do, not necessarily what a dishwasher or a low-level data entry clerk can handle or does handle. Employed mothers tend to be authoritative with their children in a parenting style leading to academic and social success. Advantages to having parents with more complex occupations are lower when the money and the time are stretched by a large family or a new baby. Now, carrying on with parents as a socializer, the age at which parents have babies has a strong influence on their children's development. Those born to adolescent mothers are at risk for developmental problems, largely because adolescent mothers have still got growth and development issues of their own. They're still young and developing, and they aren't as capable nor economically as viable to support children. And that's not a general, blanket comment. It's really just that the majority of adolescent mothers aren't prepared to be mothers completely yet. Pregnancies of young teens are highly risky. Babies are likely to be premature. Young mothers lack financial and social resources to overcome the physical disadvantages. They're likely to be raised by in a single parent home or with grandparents. Teens are finding their own identity and may be impatient with the limits of their activities. Babies are very limiting. In 2008, the average age of mothers was 29.8 years. The reason for delay in childbearing, pursuit of education, increased labor force participation, delayed union formation in part because of the previous two. Children of later parents do as well as others, though their life experiences are different. Older fathers are less physically active and are more likely to spend time reading and playing pretend. Mature parents are more apt to be financially stable. They can often provide enriching experiences such as museum visits or travel. However, children in such families may fear their parents may die. Children of late parents can expect a stable home, favorable income, good neighborhood environment. Older women, however, are at greater risk of problems in pregnancy, likelier to use reproductive technologies as a result, at risk of multiple births. So what accounts for the differences in child well-being? Well, most children in non-traditional families grow up without major problems. Children who live in poverty are more likely to develop a range of diseases, die earlier, and continue to expect deprivation learning later in life. Now, part of that account is accounted by socialization, and this is what they learn. They learn what they witness, and if what they witness is deprivation and lack, then they come to accept that that's what's their lot in life. So children who expect severe conflict between their parents fare more poorly. Children often do better once high conflict parents separate. The interactions within families have greater impact on family structure by itself. Now, the quality of parenting can affect children's well-being. Divorced parents tend to spend less time with their children, also tend to have fewer rules, but use harsher discipline than parents who stay married. Now, remember, these are statistically based generalities. It doesn't apply that you might know people, and you yourself may be a single mom, who might not apply the same sort of condition, and that's where there's variability in all of this. But this is based on the research that's been done and the surveys that have been completed, and so these are generalities that we can make about general population, not that there aren't exceptions. Home and school environments with warmth and clear rules help children flourish. So does a parenting style that is warm and structured while allowing for the child's individuality. So it's a balance between these two things. If we look at parenting styles, the quality of parenting and a day-to-day treatment affects children's well-being. That the authoritarian parents, they're like drill sergeant type, demanding but unresponsive. Children growing up in an authoritarian family tend to become submissive, unable to make decisions for themselves, and defiant or rebellious, whereas permissive parents are quick to respond but demand very little from their children. Children with permissive families are likelier to exhibit behavior problems and not perform well at school. Authoritative, this is different than authoritarian, authoritative parents take a middle position. They have high expectations, but they're also very responsive to their children's needs. And children from authoritative families are often described as achievers and are competent and friendly. Whereas with uninvolved parents, they're all low in demands and low in responsiveness. Children with uninvolved parents are most likely to have poor academic performance and weak social skills, as well as most behavioral problems. Now, these again are generalizations in terms of quadrants. Now, a lot of parenting will flop between two, or depending upon circumstances, be variable. But what's interesting about parenting styles is that we don't often sit down with a partner and decide our parenting style. We often just seem to do what we had done to us, or try to avoid the things that we thought were bad by our own parents, as opposed to having a specific plan. So when we think also about what accounts for some of these differences in child well-being, well, spanking is a big issue when we think about one of the ways that we sort of interact with our children to try to give them direction. Spanking is probably less effective in changing children's behavior than nonviolent forms of discipline, and there's a lot of research that supports that. Conflict between parents increases the risk that children will have adjustment problems, particularly if parents don't have these conflicts in a fair and a reasonable manner. That is to say, that they come to a solution that they both agree on. If they don't resolve conflicts effectively and in fact just argue and yell, then that has a negative impact on children. Parents' use of destructive tactics like yelling and name-calling and threatening and withdrawal, this distresses children, and it shouldn't be any surprise. Children may feel more threatened by disagreements, are more likely to blame themselves for their parents' problems than those whose parents use more constructive tactics. Kids are very self-centered, and if they see things going downhill around them, they sort of view that from, well, what have I done to cause this? Now, the amount of conflict between parents and teenagers relates to parents' warmth and supportiveness. If there's a hostile, authoritarian sort of tendency within the family, then conflict tends to escalate. If supportive, family relations can improve over the teen years. So other issues that might influence family difference, you could ask the question, what family stories, were you told? What messages did you give? How did these messages and the way that you were raised affect your development? So routines. Usually they're involving very little conscious thought, and they occur frequently and often daily, these little routines. How you eat breakfast, how you have evening routine, how you were put to bed as a child, and how those things changed over time. Rituals are events that tell families, this is who we are. And they're important. They help define who we are. It's a family history of traditions that help shape children. That some of these traditions, when you get married to somebody else, conflict with your partner, and you end up having to spend some time figuring out how your traditions overlap and how you find your own traditions. Now, when we look at diversity in parenting, there are some differences between English Canadians and French Canadians. One study found that English-speaking Montrealers encouraged their children to be more independent in solving problems than did French-speaking Montrealers. So even within smaller elements of Canadian culture, there can be some differences. Aboriginal families strongly emphasize the interdependence of all life and have a strong sense of spirituality. Traditional Aboriginal societies recognize the basic family unit of parents, children living together, but family also includes the broader network of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, more of the extended family experience. Carrying on with diversity, children from immigrant families may be pulled between two cultural ideals. One with their attitudes raising concerns within their family as where they came from, and also the new culture of Canadian culture. North American societies encourage independence and spontaneity. Many other cultures, such as Chinese or South Asians, expect children to be forced to focus on their family and respect their elders. So there could be some conflict between what is expected in the country that they've moved to and what was expected in the country they came from. Immigrant parents typically hold different expectations of their children than Canadian-born parents do, and so preserving their cultural heritage and language and passing it on through their children is important. In comparison to Euro-American parents, Chinese parents tend to have more authoritarian parent style, which tends to have a positive outcome for Chinese children versus the Euro-American children. One possible explanation is that while Chinese parents are more likely to focus on negative traits, they also emphasize that these can improve upon, through work and effort. Now, if we look at the wider family circle, most children have at least one sibling, and this was recognized in 2011. 45% of families with just one child living at home, 38% with two, and 16% with three or more. The sibling relationships are similar to peer relationships in that they are more egalitarian than they are between parents and children. Unlike peer relationships, the sibling relationship is ascribed. That is, it's not an option. You don't choose your siblings, they are born into a family, which makes them ascribed. The number of siblings, their age, and the sex can affect the socialization of a child. Significant differences between firstborn and later-born children in outcomes such as educational achievement and income. Firstborn in family is typically advantaged. Later-born children receive less quality time with parents. Older siblings partly replace parents in providing some of this quality time, which benefits firstborns because they have the opportunity to be teachers from an early age. Only children may have many of these characteristics of firstborn siblings. Given that sibling relationships are obligatory, brothers and sisters must learn to resolve conflict issues. So this can be a great warmth and an affection between brothers and sisters. Sibling relationships can be one of the most enduring in a person's life. They have stores of memory in common. If parents treat siblings as a single group without the individual qualities, for example, the kids, children engage in more rivalry and conflict. So we look beyond the immediate family, and more children are probably know their grandparents now than in early generations because, well, there's an increased lifespan. Older people are alive longer when children get older. Grandparents can reduce the impact on children of parents with problems such as mental health issues and family breakup. Grandparenting styles range from companionship without any parenting, involvement like parent-like responsibilities, and remoteness, or combinations of these three styles. In Aboriginal cultures in Canada, they have assigned an important role to the extended family and child rearing. Aboriginal children are more likely than others to be living with grandparents. Most also have frequent contact with other extended family members. Now, if we broaden the family circle to include, maybe there are families with children with exceptionalities, and having a brother or a sister with an exceptionality affects socialization. They must adjust to the changes in family rhythms as parents pay attention to special needs of an exceptional child. Brothers, and especially sisters, may be expected to help with child care and may be asked to include sibling and social activities. Some youngsters feel they must make up for what the sibling cannot achieve.